A lot of people might not realize that yesterday was the 25th anniversary of what at the time was one of the most deadly bombings in the history of the United States. And there's no crowdsource the truth guest who is more familiar with the details of the Oklahoma City bombing than Cody Snodgres. Ole, Cody, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Hello, good to be here. I don't know what happened to the Skype thing. I think it was hit because everything was working fine and it just went out.
Yep. Cody and I were on Skype earlier this morning, preparing obviously for a very special presentation, and we had planned to do a bunch of things that didn't quite work out, but that's okay because we're still going to talk about this stuff. I think it's an opportune time to discuss the 25 years that have passed since that event and how false flags and black ops have shaped the future, the present, and the past. Where should we begin, guys?
I would say since Cody was directly involved in personal ways around that, maybe you could give a little background, Cody, about what went down.
Yeah, boy, it's a big story, and I'll try to just hit the high points. The Murrah Building bombing happened at 9:02 a.m. Central Time, April 19th, 1995. That was 25 years ago in one day, and it was a big thing. What most Americans don't realize, most people in the world don't realize, that was a false flag attack. I was offered the job to bomb that building by another CIA contractor, Harold Leonard, in October 1994, months before anyone ever heard of Tim McVeigh or any of that, for $1 million in cash. That was just what they were offered to pay me. That wasn't the budget for the job. That would have been something separate had I taken that job. But the main thing about this thing is the cover-up of the Gulf War syndrome and the cover-up of anthrax vaccines and the squalene adjuncts specifically that were used in those vaccines. Everyone knows that Saddam Hussein had fought a bloody 8-year war with the Iranians, and Donald Rumsfeld, who was our Secretary of Defense at the time, he had flown over to Baghdad, and we had pictures of him here in our media meeting Saddam Hussein. They were giving him satellite intelligence and everything. And the Iranians had approximately 10-to-1 infantry advantage over us, or over our ally, Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, was a CIA asset as well, just like Manuel Noriega in Panama was. And they were afraid that the Iranians had overrun him. And in their last case, they were going to use biological weapons, namely the anthrax. That was the Ames strain of anthrax made at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Has a weaponized protein coat on it, a smaller size, so the spores are easily more absorbed and sprayed by aerial configurations, weapons configurations. So to make a long story short, we had our ally there. He turned on us when he invaded Kuwait, and they poised several divisions right by the Saudi border. They overran Kuwait in a very short time. The Saudis were very reticent of this. They put pressure on the Bush administration. They wanted something done, and we had to get our troops in the field quickly. So the Ames strain of anthrax, we had given them covertly. That was all part of the Iran-Contra affair with Ronald Reagan and all of them. They were supplying arms to both Iran and Iraq in the war covertly. They kept a lot of this hidden from the American people. And all these records, everything was all stored in the Murrah Building. But Saddam Hussein couldn't defeat the Iranians. The war was long and bloody. And after he invaded Kuwait, then we had to demonize him and turn him into our enemy. And so the Ames strain of anthrax required a 6-month vaccine, 1 month, one shot every month to build immunity, and we didn't have the time. Bush and them did not have the time. So they cooked up the vaccine. It was a squalene adjunct. It was made by Bioport and several other companies. It was given to our troops here in America without FDA testing. That was waived by executive order. And so our guys were guinea pigs, basically. And there was approximately 480,000 U.S. troops of various Army, Navy, Air Force, all of them. And they got these shots. The first lot was at Dover Air Force Base. In my book, Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing, we have all the information about these vaccines. And, this ties in to what's going on now with the COVID-19. But this is a big story, but to make it all long and simple, is these vaccines were given, people started getting autoimmune diseases and all. They wrapped it all up into what's called the Gulf War Syndrome. It was a massive cover-up of the vaccine situation. And they were protecting a lot of the companies that have ties to the Carlyle Group and others in the defense industry. So Senator Christopher Shea, here was a Republican from Connecticut. He was on the Armed Services Committee chair that was looking into Gulf War Syndrome. He ordered FBI to collect up all the data of over 400,000 of our servicemen. There was people with sicknesses, rashes, double vision, blurred, nausea, all kinds of things that happened. They laid it off on the oil well fires and everything else. And so anyway, Christopher Shea told the FBI to task them to get all the records, and it was a big process. They gave them about a year to get them, and they started compiling all the records from various sources, and they were stored in the Murrah Building. Then when the Murrah Building blew up, of course, all those records were gone. And, in the book, I talk about, the congressional hearings for the Gulf War Syndrome. I think that was September 19th of 1996. That's where the DOD admitted. We have in the appendix the actual copy out of the DOD testimony, congressional testimony, and that was over 400,000 Gulf War Syndrome records had disappeared. They admitted that. And then McVeigh was executed later, of course, in June 11th, 2001. He was a patsy for the whole op. And also the cover-up, the Murrah Building was the cover-up of the depleted uranium weapons that were used over there, approximately 200 tons of them. A lot of them were what they call the silver bullet. That was the M1A1 Abrams tank. Sabot rounds. They traveled a real high velocity. And when they hit the predominant weapons in the area, they were tank busters, for the T-72. Saddam Hussein had some T-54 tanks from the Soviet Union. But the T-72s had 11-ton turrets, and those things had such high kinetic energy, they would just send an 11-ton turret blowing, tumbling like a tumbleweed, and it would make a big fireball. And in the fireball, it was so hot that the ambient oxygen in the atmosphere mixed with this depleted uranium-238 and formed new compounds. These are the first time these weapons were ever used in a war. And they've been tested at Dugway Proving Grounds here in the U.S. and stuff, but the DOD used them over there. They were highly effective, but a secondary consequence was radiation poisoning. And these new fireballs caused uranium oxide and uranium dioxide. And these two compounds had a particulate size of approximately 4 microns. Now, the DOD had given MOP gear, the British, the French, all the coalition forces in the area also had their own MOP gear, but most of the military gear went down to 10 microns. And so what happened was our troops were breathing this new toxin, this radiation that no one had ever seen before on a wide scale. And it went through our filters in the MOP gear, and it collected in the, the testicles for men, the reproductive glands, and then the thyroid glands. And so our soldiers would come back and, they'd make love to their wives or whatever, and then they got stateside. And this radiation, this low-level depleted uranium radiation was being transmitted in their semen. And there was a lot of women that started having babies. and the Air Force called it failure to thrive syndrome and so forth. And there was a brand new disease coming out, just like the poisoning after Agent Orange happened from DuPont with the dioxin poisoning that occurred in Operation Ranch Hand, 69 to 71 in Vietnam. And then later on, they had the big DOD lawsuit for all the Vietnam veterans that were poisoned by this thing they used. Well, here, fast forward to Iraq, January 91 is when it began. Now we have this radiation poisoning. So on top of the vaccine adjuncts and the squalene and all the poisoning from that, our troops also were exposed secondarily to this radiation toxin. So all of this stuff was covered up, and the Pentagon was released out of maybe trillions, hundreds of billions. It's an untold number of dollars in future medical payments, because once this radiation poisoning was transmitted to the female, then the female had child, then the child would have a grandchild and a great-grandchild. The Pentagon did not know how far this uranium poisoning would be transmitted to multiple generations. And the medical bills could have been absolutely astounding when you look at intergenerational radiation poisoning like this. So when the Murrah billing went up, all those medical records that could have proven medical culpability in the Senate subcommittee hearings with Senator Shea, Christopher Shea, all the evidence, went away. And so the Pentagon itself was off the hook for untold amount of damages. And that's one main reason why the Murrah building was destroyed. The other one was the destruction of records from the Bill and Hillary Clinton. Yeah, that were in Arkansas. So we went through all that in the book too. So, I mean, I could talk a long time. I'm just trying to hit the high points. There were three main reasons why that Murrah building was bombed. The third one was that Bill Clinton had tried to get his anti-effective Terrorist and Death Penalty Act passed before 1995, and he couldn't get the votes in Congress. But after all the congressmen got scared after April 19th of 1995 and the Murrah building went up, then he certainly got the votes for that. And that vote did eviscerate much of our U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, and it also allowed for UN troops to be placed in our, on our soil. Clinton issued a PDD, Presidential Directive 25, and that was a classified one that went in. It regarded bringing UN troops on our soil and keeping them here under certain guises, and that everyone saw that as a way to let the New World Order in here to the U.S. and tear our Constitution up. So anyway, the whole story is in the book, Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. It took me 4.5 years to write. It's 700 pages. It's there at Ole's website, lightonconspiracies.com. And I'd like to thank, it's been 25 years since that bombing, and in November 2017, me and Ole broke the story. He helped me. I want to thank Ole Dammegard for helping me. It's very hard to break stories like this. I was very scared, threatened, all the things that have happened. We've been censored completely into the Stone Age. All kinds of attacks on Stripe accounts, PayPal accounts. My Social Security accounts were shut down. Our computers hit. YouTube videos deleted, censored, static on the line. The whole thing. So it's been an uphill fight, and I want to thank Ole. I want to thank you, Jason, for doing the show today. I got a lot of things to say. I might be rambling, but I'm trying to cover a big subject in a small time.
I think you've done a great job, Cody, of just filling people in, because 25 years, there's going to be people listening right now who weren't even alive at the time. And this is one of the components of these types of false flags, isn't it, Ole? I mean, they want to kind of just coat it over with nonsense for a long enough period of time that, as Cody is talking about, generationally, people tend to forget about this stuff. And we're going to be going really in depth, even have some questions and answers for Cody when we continue the conversation in just under 15 minutes on our sponsor-exclusive segment, which sponsors can view on patreon.com/lightonconspiracies, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Ole, what comes to mind when you hear Cody recounting this event?
What comes to mind is the memories Cody and I have together when we first broke this story, or when Cody decided to step forward. It was a major step for him. It was a very big step for me as well, because well, I have a family. He has a family. You never know how these things goes, and it was like a. I mean, I think Cody, did we do 5 interviews per day the first week or two? I think, just to get the information out there to as many as possible, to get some kind of security for Cody, because that's the only thing that could give security, to get it out there. And I feel very happy and proud that we're all still here breathing, and especially Cody, who's been going through absolute hell.
Yeah.
But I think it's amazing now. What was inside the head of Cody is now known to millions and millions of people out there.
Absolutely. And it's good to get that information out. I mean, people would not be aware of this. I mean, frankly, Cody is sharing things with us right now that perhaps people who have missed those previous interviews might not be aware of. And I don't think it's ever been more relevant than it is right now, that we're all basically in the dark, literally. You know, Ole is there. It's pretty dark. We're locked in our homes. We're told you can't go outside.
There's been day 36.
Day 36. And what
they've
started
just added
here.
on. No, they just added on. They say now it's May 11th, and that the schools may not start until September. It's killing people here, I tell you. Kim is my sweetheart is doing a lot of work driving out food to people. I mean, we're not talking homeless people. We're talking about normal families. But here, a normal, like a waiter or a cleaner or something, they have between $7 and $10 per hour. So it's like, if you're locked down for this time of this duration of time, it really starts to, there's the food is there, but there's no money, so people can't afford to buy it. So I think she was driving around together with some other people, delivering food to more than 150 people, and it's just growing all the time. So every time they say we're just going to add another week or two, don't worry, but that is disastrous. It's absolutely, I mean, it can become a situation between life and death. And the thing is, when people get hungry, they get desperate, and then they do things they wouldn't do otherwise. So it's not good at all.
Yeah, and we're starting to see that in New York. I mean, it's been happening from the very first day that the homeless and desperate population is becoming increasingly desperate and acting out. The other thing that's recently started is that there's been a recommendation from the governor of New York that people wear these paper medical masks that a lot of doctors have said will not do anything. It's not a requirement, but what's happening now is, if you're outside in New York City without one of these masks, there are some people who feel it's their duty to provoke confrontations and insist that you put on a mask and that you're damaging society and other things like that. Of course, these people don't realize that the individuals who are really damaging society are the ones that are planting these false flags and doing all of these things. I can't help but think about, when Cody tells us about the vaccinations related to this weaponized anthrax, TruePundit.com just this morning has an article where they're talking about Bill Gates, who is calling for indemnification from lawsuits in order to vaccinate the global population. So he's basically talking about recreating exactly what Cody just told us about, testing these vaccines, getting special approval from the Food and Drug Administration here in the United States to deploy a vaccine without the normal testing, which we should add. The normal testing for vaccines was dialed way back compared to other products, medical products, pharmaceuticals. In 1984 or 1982, whenever it was that the Vaccine Injury Act was passed, which itself indemnifies pharmaceutical companies from any type of lawsuits should someone be injured by the vaccine. Now, what I want us to discuss in just about 10 minutes when we transition over to the sponsor-exclusive segment on patreon.com/lightonconspiracies and on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth is how this is all playing out and how we're going to be affected, the population, by this vaccination. It's not about Bill Gates wanting to save the world. This is about controlling every single individual. The other thing I wanted to say about the masks is, you know, Whole Foods, which is in the same building as my apartment and my normal supermarket, was in 2018 or 19 purchased by Amazon.com. So that's now controlled by Jeff Bezos and that whole entity. There's an independently owned supermarket a few blocks away. I went there. And as a private business, this is their right. They said I'm not allowed in the store without a mask. And to me, gentlemen, this was the precursor to not being allowed in the store without first scanning my fist to determine if I have a chip that tells them if I'm vaccinated from this disease or not. So there's no need to alter the Constitution of the United States. They just need a coalition of the willing, something that Cody has heard many times before, a coalition of willing privately owned corporations that will deny you access to their services if you cannot prove that you are chipped and vaccinated. So we'll be talking about that. We're now down to just about 5 minutes. I hope people will join us for the sponsor exclusive segment. And gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Thanks for watching, everybody.